And I'm going to start. We've been doing this really nice little, I've made it a kind of a ritual. So I'm just showing you what's in the garden. So we've had the hippeastrums and the angel trumpets, and now we've got salvia, which is quite robust at the moment and beautiful. And it lasts, if you pick it and have it in a vase, it'll last for a long time. Hi, Carol. Ian, Di, and Martin might be there too. Good. And I'm just going to use this first part of the session to read you something. Let's see, I've got it marked, which comes from our favorite. Isn't that right, Ken? Pema Chodron. Does that read backwards when I put it up to the screen? Okay, of course not. Yeah, so I thought this was so apt because for the people in postcode 2430, we went into a snap lockdown on Monday night. And believe it or not, one of the Rinpoches, one of the spiritual leaders, talks about how all of us, whether we want to or not, live in a bubble. And he says this is our own version of reality created by our ego, which is always turning away from the open-ended nature of how things are and trying to maintain the familiar. Just in case people are talking to pets or to other people, I'm going to mute you. There you go. Yeah, that's better, much better. Yeah, so we're in this bubble, and most of this time we keep it intact. Everything in our bubble is fairly predictable and seems to make sense. But even we might be going through a hard time, but on some level we're able to hold it all together. We get up in the morning, we enter familiar worlds, we go through our day with many familiar routines. And it's all pretty unsurprising. This isn't something we consciously choose to do. Whatever kind of life we have our own version of a bubble. It's our default way of being, and most of the time we don't even know we're doing it. Although we keep hoping that we'll get back to normal one day. I think that's a refrain. And when the bubble bursts, we can recognize that we're walking through a very important doorway. So last week we had lots of freedom. I made camping arrangements and so forth. And then I had to accommodate, not being able to do those things. But we can experiment with hanging out on the other side of that doorway. And maybe even we can learn to relax there. So having presented yourself for this Zoom yoga class, let's hope we can create a safe space where you can relax. And we'll start out with a little, I'll call it a practicum on hips. So we're going to be concentrating on that part of our body, our pelvis and our hips. So come on up to standing. And I don't know whether you ever think about the way that you're able to get around by dint of the way that you move your pelvis. But we have tremendous potential for mobility there. So one way that we use the pelvis, and you can do this with me, is just to create circular movement with it. So we don't really do this movement very much in the course of a day or course of a week or even a month, but it's actually really a nice movement for loosening up the lower back. And if you want to get fancy with it, then you can do move into figure eights. And basically that's all you're doing is you're creating rotation through the base of your spine and a kind of a circling movement through the hips. I seem not to be able to talk and make figure eights, but that's all right. And then when you come back to being still again, another really common movement, and we know this happens, when you sit down and then you try to sit up straight because that's good posture. And it happens through the posterior and anterior tilt of your pelvis. So when you lift up from the front of your pelvis, the hip bones move up towards your ribs, and when you drop the hips forward, then the bones move down towards the floor. So you can go back and forth between those two movements. And depending on your own body, you have greater or less movement there. Then another movement that you may not have thought about that's very integral to walking is you can do this by balancing. Let's say you balance on your right foot, and then it's as though you're trying to lift your left foot off of the floor and shortening that side of your waist. You can't lift that foot off the floor because it's kind of glued there. And if you go back and forth between those two movements, I think sometimes they're called hip hitching. So you're hitching one hip up towards your ribs, and you go back and forth like that. And you can feel that's an entirely different sensation probably in your lower back as you do that. And then just do a few more and see if you can keep your torso right in the middle. So it's well and truly just a hip movement or a leg and a hip movement. Okay, and then if we come to a halt again, and see if you can keep your balance. Maybe you need to move towards a wall or have a chair behind you. And bring yourself to balance just on one foot. And let's say that's your left foot. And bring your right knee up towards your chest. So that movement is hip flexion. When you draw the knee up, you can hold the front of the knee to keep your balance. And then you've got to do the other leg. And lifting up. Like that. So flexion and then extension. Extension and that movement we'll do from a lying down position. So let's move into lying face up on your mat. When you get yourself into position, have your legs bent and your feet on the floor. And then lift your right knee towards your chest, your right foot off the floor. Lift your left knee towards your chest, and then bring your hands over the front of your knees. And let's continue hip flexion now in a reclining position. So moving your knees away from you, and then bringing them in close. Straightening your arms as you move your knees away, just so simple. And then bending your elbows close to your ribs as you bring your knees in. And then in this movement, besides flexing at the hips, you're doing a kind of posterior and anterior tilt to your pelvis. So there's lots of benefits in this very simple pose called Apanasana. All right, and then let's just do one more where we'll do a series of a few more, where when you bring your knees towards you, see if you can move your sitting bones towards the floor. Your sitting bones being, where your pants line is in your underwear. So knees come in, but you're still trying to move the sitting bones towards the floor. Moving out, the sitting bones naturally move towards the floor. And in movement, and you're just seeing what that sensation is like. And not to predict your experience, but what I notice is when I move my sitting bones towards the floor in this position, there's more turning in of my legs and the sitting bones widen. But you might have a slightly different experience. Okay, good. And then bring your feet onto the floor. And we're just exploring these different movements. To what end? Probably to create a little bit more suppleness and maybe strength through the lower back and the base of the spine. Let your arms drop out to the side. And here you are. You've still got 2 feet on the floor, knees up. And then let your knees drop over to the right side. And let the left buttock come entirely off the floor as much as you want. And you've just done a kind of rotation to your hips. And let's see what it's like on the other side. And both knees to the left side. And left knee can come all the way down to the floor. And then go with a little bit more pace in what you're doing. Make sure this feels safe and a nice movement for your back. And right and left, a little bit like the windscreen wiper. And then pause in the middle, and I'll ask you to add one more element here. So let your knees drop over to the right side, and there's your right leg possibly now resting onto the ground. Then left foot, press your left footprint into the mat, and then lift your left hip a little bit more. So possibly you've increased your rotation to the right side. And then go over to the left, and left leg drops out like Tsukasana. And then press your right foot, so your whole of your right foot's on the floor. You're pressing down and lifting that right buttock at the same time. Go one more time, right and left. And allow your head to loll to one side. If that feels nice for you, it does for me. Excellent. And then come back to the center where you'll have your 2 feet on the ground and knees up again and feet a little bit apart. And then extend one leg out and then the other. So you've got this like one long line of your body, your arms near to your side. And then because we haven't focused very much on breathing, let's do this in a reclining position, the breath cycles. So as you bring your arms overhead, point your toes away from you and extend the arms beyond your shoulders. And then exhale, bring your arms down to your side again and flex your feet and bring your toes back towards your knees. Now, wrap the movement in your breath. So start the inhalation a little bit before you start to move and finish the inhalation after the movement has stopped. The exhalation starts, the movement starts, toes are pulling back towards your knees, the movement stops, and a little bit more puff of exhalation. See what that's like. Make sure this feels nice for your shoulders, and if it's a little bit beyond your rotation, don't try to take your arms all the way to the floor. Just one more round, arms overhead and then back by your side. And keep the kind of clip lock that connects your lower sternum with your pubic bone. So the ribs, even when your arms are overhead, don't flare. All right, going back to bent leg position, and your 2 feet on the floor near to your buttocks, a little bit apart. And let's see what kind of movements we can create through the pelvis when we do our small bridges, Bandhasana. So with your arms remaining by your side, press your footprint into the floor and start to lift the hips up, curl the tailbone up, and come up just a little bit on an in-breath. And then let's keep to the cycle of breathing. So up on the inhale and down on the exhale, just to get a rhythm going and according to your own As you go along here, we'll just do several of these. When you lift up, make sure that your tailbone isn't engaged. Those little muscles around your coccyx, keep them relaxed. All right, and then one more where you're lifting up into your back bend and then possibly staying up this time. Feel your footprints into the mat and make them firm. And then reach your hands underneath the backs of your thighs. Notice again if you're clenching your buttocks on the inside, and then let them be relaxed. And then as you lift up, see if you can use more of your hamstrings, the muscles at the backs of your thighs, than your buttock muscles. It's not so easy to do. And pressing on the inside of your feet, on the downside of your thighs, and the outer hips. And then begin to lower down slowly and back to starting position. We'll do that just one more time, and to increase your height of your lift, if you like, and if that's going well. Now take your arms overhead as you start to come up. Release that tightening through the coccyx. Keep that area soft. And then when the arms are overhead, hold it there for a moment, and then see if you can get that lift again from the backs of your thighs. It's almost as though your thigh bones are lifting up to your quadriceps, and the quadriceps up towards the ceiling. And exhaling, coming down a little bit at a time so that you feel each vertebrae, or at least each segment of your back, coming down. And then give yourself a hug and rock a little bit side to side, which could qualify as another pelvic movement. Right, when you've done that a few times, then roll over onto your right side and come up to all fours position on your mat. In other words, cat pose. All right, well, let's keep going and integrating the hip movement and the spine. Lift your spine up towards the ceiling. Exhale. Inhale, drop the spine and move the sternum forward. Keep the clip lock between your sternum and the base of your pelvis. And moving back and forth between those really nice, sometimes they can feel really delicious. Moving through the arc of your spine. And then pause in a neutral position, so your back is relatively flat. And then from there, let's move just the hips in a circular fashion. And the other direction too. And what you'll soon discover is that it's impossible to move the pelvis this way unless you're moving the spine, including your neck and your shoulders. All right, let's take a break for your wrists and come down onto your elbows, but with your palms up. And stretch open your fingers from your thumb to your little finger, and even press them down, forearms pressing down. All right, back into the fray, and both hands supporting you. Beautiful. And then let's do a slightly different movement. So we're going to combine flexion with folding towards the knee. So lifting the right knee off your floor and bringing it in towards your chest, and then your head towards your knee. And then extension and bringing that leg right behind you and lifting your chest and looking out. Let's go back and forth to those two possibilities, potentialities. And this third time or fourth time for you, then come to a standstill again, or a knee still. You're on both knees. And then let's start on the other side and bringing left knee in and extending it away. And you're all very experienced in yoga, I would say. So as you do this movement, keep your sacrum level with the ceiling. In other words, as you take the leg back especially, avoid lifting the hip. All right, and just one more time. And bringing the knee back to base. And one more wrist rest. Come down onto your elbows, palms up. Actually, this is a nice position that we could do a lateral stretch in child's pose. So find your own way of doing child's pose here. If your knees are a bit stressed by pressure, then you might want to keep your buttocks up slightly, or just go on, draw your buttocks back as far as you can and towards your heels. So how the lateral stretch happens here is we're going to take the right hand further to the right and then follow it with the left hand. And you could, I don't know, end up one hand on top of the other. That might be a bridge too far, but if you can, or otherwise the hands parallel. And then dip your chin in towards your chest and extend. Where are we extending? That whole left side of your body. All right, and then take a walk over to side 2. And either hands parallel or one on top of the other, right hand on top of the left. Bring your head in and open up through the ribs on that side. Give them all the space. All right, and then back to center. And we're going to move from the kneeling position into downward facing dog pose. Let's do that in a slow fashion so you get a feeling for your upper back part of your back. And if you lift between your shoulder blades, it's actually as though you're moving your lungs up towards your back, to dorsothoracic. And then do the same thing with your lower ribs, and then through your navel, lifting up towards your backbone. And then tuck your toes under and lift up. And then start with a bit of walking, alternate walking. One leg bends and then the other. Called variously walking the dog or pedaling. And then just notice, because we're so fixed on the pelvis movement, what is it? What is the movement there? It's a little bit of the hitching of your hips and a little bit of pelvic tilting. Okay, good. And then when you come to halt here, bend your knees, and then as straight as you can make through your arms and your side ribs and your back, keeping the knees bent, give yourself a good shoulder stretch. Rest at any point when you need to, but if you can keep that action, then add the neck movement and bring your chin in towards the jugular notch. And take a break. And coming down either onto your elbows or like child's pose, and let all the effort go out of your body. It's a great training just to be able to let go. Surrender the weight of your body, let your shoulders fall out. And back into dog pose. We're going to do a little bit of strengthening work here through plank pose. So from straight leg dog pose, well, you know, relatively straight, arms straight, then start to bring your chest forward over your arms over your wrists. Then tighten your buttocks. This time do tighten around your tailbone. Feel your front thigh muscles lifting up against the bones, and then roll back and stretch once more in dog pose. Create that forward momentum again as your chest comes forward, shoulders above your wrists. And lead with your sternum. It makes a difference, but you're still looking down. And back you go. Good. And then third time coming forward in plank pose. The buttocks are firm. Sternum is open forward, and then heading for child's pose and resting there. Just imagine that you're heading for Shavasana, and how much would you let go then? But we're not. We're going to do one more position from the dog pose. So coming back, all fours, lift your spine, tuck the toes under. And then from there, step your right foot back, tuck your toes under. So your left foot is a little bit forward and your right foot is back. And then just to get a stronger stretch to the back of your left leg, keep that momentum, your buttocks moving back, tailbone moving back, and then switch, and left foot back. If that's too strong in your hamstring stretch, keep the front knee bent. Extending back, and then 2 feet together, and walking forward to your hands, start to come up to standing. Just curl up very slowly. And all the way up. Okay, good work. And we'll continue to give due consideration to the hips. Take yourself back to the wall. You have a wall behind you. And if you don't have that wall, you might have a chair next to you. And let's do a little bit with balance. So standing from Tadasana, feel your circumference of your footprint. Lift your toes, spread them. Feel the outside of your feet, the inside of your feet, the heel bone at the front, and then the back of the heel. Relax your shoulders. Right? And then from there, lift your left foot off the floor, your right foot off the floor, and bring your right knee towards your chest. Clasp at the front of your knee. So you just did this a little while ago in that movement of hitching the leg up and flexing the pelvis. So keep your chest nice and high. Good. And then release that leg down. We're doing a preparation for tree pose. Second side, when your weight is borne on your right foot now, starting to lift your left knee towards your chest. It's always good to go slow, I think. Well, I do at this time in my life. I was always a bit speedy when I was younger. But go slow, because then you just find your balance as you go along. And clutching at the front of the knee, lifting the knee as high as you can at the moment. And feel that standing foot supporting you, a firm ankle, and then release. Good. 2 shoulder rolls. Know that you're still able to relax the shoulders. And then we're going to move into tree pose. So you might want to just turn with your 2 feet on the floor, turn on your right foot and open that right knee to the side. Then keep on your toes of your right foot and bring your heel right in against your ankle. So you've already started down the path of tree pose, Tsukasana, and then you can choose. You can have the foot stay where it is or bring it up to your calf muscle, your knee, or the outer or the right hip. Sorry, just lost my balance. Good. So you've got an external rotation through that hip. Feel that knee is nice and wide. And then if you've got your balance, which I don't seem quite to have, bring your hands in front of your chest and lift your elbows. Good. And then release. Good idea to release slowly if you can. All right, and then let's work on that external rotation of that leg and hip on the left side. So turning the foot out first, balancing on your toes, get a good outward rotation through that leg and hip, and then slowly bring the leg up, wherever you're going to be, and take support as you need it. So I'm doing that. When you finish up, if possible, then the thigh resting against the inside of your thigh, the foot resting against the inside of your thigh. Pause. See if you can get the feeling, whether you're holding on to something for support or whether you're free balancing, of squeezing the hips into center. And then moving on, if you can, bringing the hands together in prayer position. And then let's see about a slow dismount this time. No, not exactly. And then shake out your legs and your feet. Not too bad. Let's do one more thing that is potentially good for your balance. Not so much about your pelvis, but doesn't go astray. Have a left foot in front of your right foot. So when you do that, your feet, it's heel to toe. So the front heel is against the back foot, big toe. And then see how you go to balance there. And create a little bit more firmness by squeezing the hips in again from the outside to the midline. Beautiful. And then swap. So as though you're on a slack rope, but fortunately we're not off the ground. Then one foot in front of the other. Observe your breathing, relax your shoulders. Squeeze the thighs in. Good, and then let go. All right, shake your legs out, shake your arms out a little bit. All right, take a step forward on, so you're on the middle of your mat, space in front, space in back. Separate your feet hip width distance. Take pause to feel your feet, the whole footprint. And then in creating good posture, feel the length of your spine from your tailbone through the natural curves of your spine up to the back of your neck to the crown of your head. Release and soften behind your knees and relax those buttock muscles. From here, moving into chair pose, start to bend your knees a little bit, and in the process of sitting back in your imaginary chair, bring your arms up just alongside your ears. Good. Feel your weight shift now. Create that shift back towards your heels. And then exhale, lower your arms. Take a breath or two and relax. Right, and this is a good reflection of what happens when you sit into a real chair. So let's do that again, and bring your arms up and sit your buttocks back. What you've done is you just created a posterior tilt to your pelvis. So the buttock bone's tucking under, tailbone tucking under. And I want to see if you can hold it a little bit longer and still lift your sitting bones a little bit towards your back waist. So you're recreating the lumbar arch. And that's enough. And coming out of your pose. And all good things happen in threes. So we're going to have round 3 of chair pose, and bring your arms up and sitting your buttocks back. So if you sat lower and brought your buttocks under more, you flattened your curve of your lower back. We don't want to do that entirely. Just want to keep it natural. So see if you can lift your sitting bones here a little bit. Excellent. And then come on up. You've done good work. And shake a leg. All right, let's move into some of the more classic standing poses. So step out on your mat. You're going to face the long end of your mat. And hopefully still the screen. And you stepped out maybe a little bit more than a meter or about a meter's distance. And then pivot on your heels and turn your feet to the right. Bring your hands onto your hips, bend your right leg. And as you've done that, then see if you can roll your right knee back. And this is the kind of opening that you had in tree pose. So your knee is pointing towards the little toe side of your foot. And that's a beautiful movement. And then we want the back to be safe here. So allow the left hip to come a little forward. And then so your torso faces more forward. Bring the right side of your chest around. So your two sides of your chest are parallel. And then finally extend your arms and you're in Warrior 2 pose, Virabhadrasana 2. Good work. And then bring yourself back up. You can keep your arms extended because you will just have to lift them again. Or you can rest them on your hands on your hips in between. Turn your feet to the left. You extend your arms and then bend that leg. So the purpose here, you could say, is to get a good groin opening, but it's also a hip movement. So it's that external rotation of your hip. And then turn the left side of your rib cage forward. And maybe you want to turn your head to look down your left arm. Good work. And then facing forward and straight leg, lower your arms, turn your feet in. Let's use that pose as a springboard for Tsukasana, or the side plank position. Turn your feet to the right. Let's keep your hands onto your hips as you bend your knee. And then rotate that knee back. And come down onto your right elbow. So you've done a lean to the right side. And your elbow rests just above your knee. Turn your right palm up. Good. And then let's take the left arm overhead. And maybe because I'm tight in my IT band here, but I really like the stretch on the outer hip in this position. And especially if I stretch from my left waist to my left heel. And feel a strong anchor for that leg. And then come up from there. Inhale. And arms out to the side. And back to your hips, hands onto your hips. Turn your feet to the left. Beautiful. And then bending that leg. The knee opens back, and then we're going to rest there. It's not really rest, is it? It's a resting standing pose. I think that's a contradiction. And then from that position, let's extend the right arm. And especially getting that good stretch on the outer right hip from your right waist all the way to the right ankle. Good. And then slowly come up and your arms down and stepping into center. Okay, good work. And then let's take up your block. I don't know what kind of good substitute there is for one of these foam blocks, but it might be a book. It'd have to be a very big book. We're going to take a kneeling position on your mat. So fold up your mat double if you have a hard surface that you're kneeling on. Otherwise, I've got double mats here. That's a really nice way to do it. So here we are in a kneeling up position. And then we're going to move into a similar side stretch to what you just did. So take the block onto your right side. I've got mine on the high end. If you want more of a challenge, then drop it down to the low side. And then extend your left leg to the left. And rest your heel of your hand onto the top of the block. Then let's take the extension for that leg and hip by bringing the left arm overhead. And the left arm just above your ear if you can, or if that's uncomfortable in your shoulder, you could have your arm a little forward of your head. And then let's anchor that back foot and press into that straight leg foot. Feel your whole footprint. And inhale and come up. Good. And then let's go the other way. And if you slide your hand down the leg, and then bring your right arm up towards the ceiling, and create a lean over to that side. So that's ribs and hips and IT band, the whole lot. And then back up. And bring your knees together for the second side. Right. And then a long straight leg out to the right side, and then coming over, to the left side, lean over onto the block, and moving right along. And maybe not so challenging for you, and maybe it's plenty challenging, but if you'd like to up the challenge a little bit, what you might do is try to lift up from your wrist to your shoulder. So you're not so dependent on the block and more dependent on the support of your knee and your feet. And beautiful. And then let's go the other side. And if you want that extra challenge on this side, as you lean over the right leg to the right, then extend your arm overhead and lift up the bottom ribs and bring them slightly forward. And up you come, and knees together. And let's try another standing pose and see if any of the work that we just did has a salutary effect on the standing poses. So come on up to standing. Keep your block over on the right side of your mat. And then step out. Now, if I say Trikonasana or triangle pose, you will generally know what I mean. We're going to do it, but a little shorter stance. So bring your feet in just a small step, one foot and then the other. Then turn your left foot in your right foot out. Right, let's do this a little differently now. Turn your trunk so that you're facing more towards the right leg, and come down with the right hand onto wherever it lands. So your knee, your shin bone, ankle, wherever it comes along that line. Good. And then as much as you can, turning the right thigh out, turning the right knee out, and then finally extending the left arm up towards the ceiling. And then rather than just an extension, create a little bit more movement there by reaching for the ceiling. Either looking forward or looking up. And then inhale and come up. And swing the feet around to the left side. Good. Relax your shoulders. And then as we begin to move into the pose, turn your trunk slightly towards the left leg. You can see where you're going here. Left hand, left leg. When you come down as far as you can go, then you're ready to bring up your top arm. And as you do that, if that feels really congested in your shoulders or tight in your shoulder, then keep your arm a little bit in front of the line of your body. And from there, create the reach out, otherwise reaching up. Good. And then inhale and come up and turning forward. And we're going to do one more round back to the right side in a slightly different movement that emphasizes your pelvis again. We just forgot about the pelvis for a little while. So bring your hands onto your, the bottom of your torso and the tops of your thighs. And if you do a little hip waggle here, side to side, you can feel that there's a potential bend from the top of the thigh. And that's what we're going to do, is we're going to bend to the right, but from that hip crease. So you're doing both a tilt of your pelvis to the right. I think there's a movement through your sitting bones too. And then from there, merely drop your hand onto your leg, ready to extend your arm up. If you've made that crease at your hip deep, then you might feel this more in your hamstrings. I can feel that for sure. Good work. And then inhale and come up. Turn your feet round to the other side. Whenever I demonstrate this, I think I'm a little teapot. So from your upright position, slide your hands onto the tops of the thighs, just where the crease is, and start your lean out to the left side, just like you're tipping the teapot out to the left side. And then just merely dropping your hand down and the opposite arm up. Beautiful. And then feel your footing. Bring your lower ribs a little forward. So that nice waist rotation. And from a strong back leg, inhale and come up. Good work. And then turn your feet forward and step into center. Right. The last of this sequence of standing poses is for releasing your back if you had created any tension there. So we're going to go wide leg. But the most important thing when you adopt your stance is that you feel like you're steady. You're not going to be able to be disturbed. Somebody walked by you and brushed you, you'd be really solid, like, I don't know, a martial artist. So both feet facing forward with your hands onto your hips. I want you to roll your feet. So your knees kind of come in and you're on the inner arches of your feet, and then you roll out and you're on the little toe side of your foot. And just as a kind of playful gesture, try that, rolling in, rolling out, rolling in. I think that's called pronating when you flatten your arch, and then supinating when you roll out. Now find the balance where the arches are still preserved and you can lift up through the inner arch and the outer arch. And with that kind of support, then start to come forward from your hips. Have your hands onto the block in front of you on whatever end you wanted to. And then lean out. So as you lean in that forward direction, feel your heels as much as you do the forefoot. And then lift your chest. Let's call this flat back. So as much as you can, lifting your chest and leading with your sternum and the back relatively flat, including the sacrum. Right. And then let's do a rotation here. So for the spine, bring your left hand onto the top of the block. Bring your right hand onto your heart. Then make your turn to that left side, or is it the right side? Right side, lifting the heart, turning, lifting the lungs. And if you're ready to extend an arm, the upper arm extending up towards the ceiling, or you might feel like you're getting much more of this if you're just turning with your hand onto your heart with a short lever of your arm. And then turn back to center, and let's swap it over. And with your left hand onto the heart center and turning, and lifting. And then adding the extension through your arm. Good. And then come back to center and releasing back to center with the full support of the block. Then let's just do a little bit of a knee bend. So if you bend your left knee to the left, keep the right leg straight and stretch out by lifting the knee there. And then back to center, roll the hip across to the opposite side. And back to center. Good. And pausing there one more time each side. And with your breath. And then we're back to base. We're going to exit from the pose first by bringing your feet in. So it's heel, toe, until your feet are close together. And then hang loose from your hips and slowly come up and all the way to standing. Okay, nicely done. And then let's take any props out of the way and come to sit on a folded blanket or a cushion with your legs straight out in front of you. I'm going to sit on a blanket. Okay, so when you've got yourself settled in a knees up position, just adjust my screen a little bit. You could hold at the front of your knees in that effort to sit up straight. And you're kind of pulling yourself up with the help of your arm strength. Or you could bring your hands behind you, and we could do this together. And if you bring your hands behind you, fingers pointing away, and push into your hands once more, supporting that straightening up through the back muscles, through your arm muscles. And let's just take away the arms out of the equation, and as much as you can, sitting on your sitting bones, the direction that we want to be going. Let's see if we can get some movement through the pelvis just by using pressure on your feet. So press as strongly as you can into your feet. And notice which way the sitting bones move. And then take the pressure off your feet as though you're trying to lift them off the ground. And notice again any tilt through the pelvis. And maybe alternate between those two movements. They're not easy because you're taking away the typical supports that we use. So pressuring your feet, and then as though you're trying to lift them. Just one more time, and pressure, and then as though you're trying to lift them. I think at this point you start to realize how much you have to use the pelvis to help you sit up. Let's take all that pressure off. Well, let's hope it happens by extending the legs out. And then do use your hands behind you to help lift out of the lower back. You could say that both arms are an extension of your spine as much as the spinal column. And extending the legs out. And in the manner that you're using your hands, see if you can project yourself forward to the sitting bones. And then bring one hand in front, the other hand in front. And what difference would it make in potentiality, in what the pelvis is able to do, if you pull your heels back towards the knees and the hips? And what difference does it make when you push out through the heels? What happens through the pelvic region when you do that? Find if I'm pulling the thigh bones back into the hips, I'm a little more on my feet, on the sitting bones. Right? And then take a break from the leg stretch. Reach the inside of your knees, lift up your knees, and draw the soles of your feet together. Let's start straight away by having the feet at a distance from your pelvis. And adjust your hips so that you're more likely to be on the sitting bones by drawing the buttocks back from the bones. And then rest your arms onto your shin bones. And take a quiet minute, just creating a momentum forward and down. It could be that there's very little movement there, and that's all right. But thinking your way into the pose as though the pubic bone moving towards the floor and the tailbone lifting up slightly. For the people that are more supple, you might want to, take this as a resting pose. Bring your trunk closer to your legs, your head closer to your feet. And if you're not in that category where you're feeling tightness in the hips, see if you can work with those two potential movements. Press down through the outer arch of your feet. And then imagine you're trying to lift your feet off of the floor. And once more pressing down, and as though you're trying to lift up. And then let's take a break from that extra effort and lift up the outer knees and extend the legs forward. Right. Let's take a simple twist, Tsukasana, with your legs bent into cross-legged. Now you won't be here very long, but you should be here for your own comfort too. So if you need that extra height underneath your hips that allows for your knees to drop out, I say don't stint. Just spoil yourself a little bit with whatever extra props you need. Then keep your feet out a little distance from the pubis and rest your hands onto your hips and come into your twist. And left hand, right knee, right hand behind you, and turning your chest. And pretty much now the pelvis is still. And you're rotating the spine around the support of the pelvis. Good. And then take the other direction. Turning to the left. And then back to center. Change the way you crossed your legs. Other leg is in front now. And we're going to approach this a little differently this round. So it's left hand onto your right knee, right hand behind you. Good. Just pause, and you're still facing towards your right knee. So your chest is facing towards your right knee. And leave it there. And then lengthen as much as you can from that tailbone through the spinal column, right up through your neck, the crown of your head, and relax your shoulders. Now turn in that more relaxed way. First looking right over your right shoulder. And then before you finish, turn your head back to center and look back over your left shoulder. As you look over your left shoulder, then see if you can improve the height of your chest. Like a little back bend in your upper back. Good work. And then let's go the other way and round. So there's not really much work in the beginning, and we're just trying to get length, elongation, and relaxation. Shoulders relaxed. And then from there, turning. That left shoulder wants to tighten up, so keep it soft. And then looking forward, or looking towards your screen. And this last opportunity, lift the height of your chest. Open it up towards the ceiling. Beautiful. And then let it all go and extend out your legs. Good. And then take a moment, give yourself a nice hug. Bring your bent legs in towards your chest. Wrap your arms around your legs. Make yourself into as small a shape as you can, chin towards your chest. In a very humble and introspective shape. And from this moment of more reflection, we're going to move into Shavasana. So take your time to lie on your mat in a reclining position that's supported by whatever props that you need. It's a good lesson to learn when you take Shavasana in any class that you do to practice self-care. And I say that for the most part, we're better at looking after other people than ourselves. But now we're going to turn that around. Take a pillow for your head, something from underneath your knees if you like, and possibly an eye covering, even a soft scarf or a t-shirt. And then once you are lying down, there's a couple of adjustments that you can do that might make you 10% more comfortable where you are. One is reaching your hands underneath your buttocks and drawing your buttock flesh down away from your back waist towards the backs of your knees. Once you've done that adjustment, it does flatten the lumbar curve a little bit. So what you're avoiding doing is pressing the waist into the floor. We just want the length there. And then there's your arms that you've placed a little ways out from the side of your body. And this part is up to you. You find your level of comfort. Is it palms upwards or palms downwards? You could play with that a little bit, rotating in both directions. And for me, it seems like if I'm palms upwards, then my top chest is a little bit more open. Really, the lungs and the heart will have a little bit more space. And then feel into that space that you've created, the heart space. And bring your breath there. So that the lungs, your breathing organs, you can feel the breath all around the heart. And perhaps on successive exhalations, encouraging the heart to relax. You can feel that on every out breath, a little more relaxation through the heart center, a quietening down. Let's say pacifying the heart. Send yourself the message, and hopefully you'll be able to receive it, that there's nothing more for you to do here. There's no persona that you have to present. For this safe position that you're in. There's no expectations of anyone towards you. And least of all yourself. And part of that message is this is a safe space to entirely let go. Allow yourself to stay quiet for another few moments. Inevitably, in the relaxation, a couple of things can happen. One is that your mind rises up and your thought patterns impose again, or you've drifted a little bit and it takes a while to come back to resurfacing. So allow yourself that your own sweet time. And only when you feel ready to, and you might want to stretch a bit. A nice thing to do is to stretch one arm overhead and lengthen the opposite leg and reverse maybe a couple times. And then treating yourself very kindly and gently, rolling onto your side. It's nice to linger there sometimes, just maybe with a hug on the side. And then eventually coming up. And getting around to sitting together. Or not. You could stay lying down. That's quite acceptable. Okay, and then bringing your hands together, kind of gathering your energy for the Friday night and weekend. And the weekend before Freedom Day, I understand, for the Sydney Siders. No, okay, but all right. So just if we just come back into that quiet space before we finish, and close your eyes again if that's comfortable for you. You know, where your hands are placed, that you can elevate your heart. And then from that restful heart that you created, bring a smile into it. So inhaling and feeling the heart smiling. Namaste. Thank you.